Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Union or Bust. I'm Juan Perez, organizing monster. Please like, subscribe, follow our Patreon. It's only $5 a month. Patreon.com/Union or Bust. We have a special co-host, Satomi Rash-Zeigler, in the house. And Satomi?
Hey, everybody, at the Labor Professor. And today we have a special guest, Councilmember Sean Elo-Rivera. So great to have you on today. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, y'all.
Perfect. Yeah, so we just want to get to know you. Like I see when I normally see people on TV, it's just really those questions and then you're out. But on this podcast, we just want to get to know you. So people that are watching this that might not know who you are or what you're about in politics, it's kind of like who is Sean Elo Rivera and where did he come from? So a little backstory about yourself. Where did you grow up? Did you grow up in San Diego?
I did not grow up in San Diego. My family moved quite a bit growing up. um, Mostly lived in Orange County. So we moved around Orange County growing up quite a bit. My dad was in the car business, actually. And that's a really tumultuous business, can really be up and down. And so um, depending on what was going on with his work or other circumstances that would lead us to move. But yeah, so mostly grew up in Orange County. We spent some time in Florida. We spent my freshman year of high school in Oregon, came back to Orange County, finished high school there, went to community college and college up there, and did a lot of my work there. So that's where I grew up. I like to say, like, so I come from like a multi-ethnic and multi-religious family. So multiple religions, multiple ethnicities. But being a Southern Californian is like core to my identity. So, living in San Diego now, growing up mostly in Orange County, I have a sister in Riverside County. I have siblings that are still in Orange County. Spent a lot of time in LA County. Like, being a Southern Californian and a Californian is like really important to who I am.
So, how'd you get to San Diego?
Yeah, so I came here for law school. I had been down here, a number of times visiting. I coached high school sports. After I finished high school myself, I started coaching high school swimming and water polo, and we would bring our teams down to San Diego. So 2 or 3 times a year, I would come down. Always enjoyed it. I had some friends who came to school down here, and we came down to party and hang out, and always had a good time when we did that. And so I knew San Diego was a place that I liked to visit, and it was relatively close to my family. So when I made the decision to attend law school and kind of looking at the different places I could go, San Diego was definitely attractive. And there was a program at one of the law schools here at California Western, and the program was called, it was a creative problem solving program. And the aim of it was to instill in lawyers skills to solve problems in the community outside of the courtroom. And I really appreciated the way that program looked and sounded, and it drew me to attending Cal Western. And who doesn't love San Diego?
This is true. This is very true. So,
And the party part.
oh, yeah,
Yeah.
little bit of the party part.
Yeah, we're all party animals here.
Um, so So before you got involved in politics, you were really active in the community. Can you just share about like your journey to get, to this point and
Yeah.
what were you involved in? Like what motivated you?
Yeah. So while I was in law school, so kind of to back up a little bit, I'd loved being a high school coach and coaching sports. I found a ton of meaning in it. I loved working with student athletes. As a head coach, you spend, really formative years with young folks, and can be a really important role, play a really important role in their lives. You kind of see young people into high school, like so leaving 8th grade, coming into high school, and you send them off to college. So really tight relationships there. I love that. And we were really good. We had a really, really strong program as well. But as I was doing that job over the last couple of years of doing it, and I was like in my mid-20s because I started so young, I started to feel like there was more I wanted to do. And I thought I would go and teach. That was a plan. Because I knew I loved working with students. But there was something else there. And at that point in time, the Obama campaign of 2008 really spoke to me. super diverse, multi-ethnic, multi-religious. I grew up in Orange County and didn't see people who looked, sounded like, thought like me, and that's not who was in leadership. And so while I was really interested in politics and political subject matter, I didn't necessarily feel like there was a space for me in Orange County. And it's like that Obama campaign like blasted that out of the water, because it was like he's like so diverse, right? And he's young, and that was really important to me as well, because I'd started coaching so young and I'd always been the youngest in my class, and it kind of like changed what I thought was possible. And that inspired me to do some traveling and try to figure out what my next chapter of life would be. And during that chapter, that kind of that exploration phase, law school seemed like the thing to do. And it seemed like the thing to do for a few reasons. One was I thought I'd be pretty good at it. I'd had professors who told me that was a good path for me. But also, there seemed like there were so many different ways to create change that I could be better at if I went to law school. So I showed up to law school with that intent. I got through my first year, and my first elective course was a creative problem solving course. And the professor at the end of the first class, she came up to me. We had like this really rich discussion in class, and she came up to me and she said, "I am the director for the community law project. You should go. You will love it." And I always remember the way she said it, because it was like so, like there was like so much certainty in her voice, that after like hearing like my opinion on things, the way I was thinking about things, that I like, it wasn't like, I think you might like this. It was like, you will love this thing, go. And so I went to the community law project, and the community law project was based in City Heights, and it ran out of 3 schools in City Heights: Hoover High School, Monroe Clark Middle School, and Rosa Parks Elementary. And as soon as I got there, I was like, this is amazing. I felt the immediately rewarding feelings that come from like helping someone who needs some help. I was working in a community that I was not familiar with yet. This was in the summer of 2011, but came to know and really love in City Heights, and like the diversity in the community being something that I had seen in my own family but never felt in the community around me. So it felt very familial. These folks from different walks of life were in this space, and I loved that. But over the course of time, I spent almost a year in that internship, and we did a lot of good work. But I also saw that people were coming in week after week, month after month, with the same issues. So the most common issues that they were dealing with were immigration, or tenant issues, landlord-tenant issues, and employment issues. And so often, in the like kind of second half of that internship, I had my mind, kind of wandering toward the way policy could address so many of these folks' issues at once. And that made me want to get into policy change work as quickly as possible. And I didn't know if that'd mean in politics or in advocacy, but it really accelerated me wanting to get out into the community and doing, that sort of on the ground work with community to create policy change. So when I graduated from law school, I worked on a congressional campaign, and my first job after that was working at Mid-City Can, which is a City Heights-based nonprofit organization, and I led the advocacy work there, the community organizing work, and the civic engagement work, and it was working hand in hand to create changes that they wanted to see. We worked on campaigns like improving access to healthy food at schools. There's a beautiful campaign. It's one of the most just like feel good, beautiful organizing efforts that I've ever been a part of. And I came in on the back end, but it was still super inspiring. And it was advocating for access to halal foods at Crawford High School. And the thing that was really beautiful about it is when you got in the room with the folks who were trying to make this change, it was moms and grandmothers primarily, and from like all over the world, Southeast Asian and East African and Latin American and white folks from San Diego as well, with like a really very pure belief that kids should be able to eat the food that they need to eat, and that your religion shouldn't be the reason that you can't get access to healthy food. And there was like 5 or 6 languages being spoken in one meeting, and they were successful in that effort, and they changed the food that was served there. There was a long-term effort to create free transit passes for youth that was born from City Heights, again, mostly moms and grandmothers working with youth. We had some really, really cool work around reforming the juvenile justice system to ensure that when a young person makes a mistake, that doesn't derail their entire life, that their value and their potential continues to be seen despite that mistake. So that was incredibly rewarding work. And I think the other thing Satomi that was great about it is it got me in to be able to be in spaces in coalition with other folks from labor, from community-based organizations, and figure out ways to work in solidarity with one another. You know, sometimes with the same goal in mind, or sometimes because showing up for their cause could help advance their cause, and vice versa.
Damn, definitely. So I was going to ask you your origin story in politics, but you knew that you wanted to get into policy work or politics when you were in school.
Yeah,
law school.
and I didn't know what the timeline would look like. That was the thing that was really uncertain to me. But again, the idea of what I really came to understand about myself during that internship and during that first part of law school was that as much as I appreciated how it felt to be able to help someone in the moment, I would get increasingly frustrated in knowing that the next week there would be someone in the same situation, and fundamentally believing that it didn't need to be that way. So that just kind of accelerated the timeline from like me getting into the policy arena. But I didn't know how long it would take to get into the political arena.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what was the moment that you were like, okay, working in or with community organizations that are affecting change by trying to influence policy to like, I need to be in there, like helping to lead the way on some of this stuff.
To actually running for office.
Yeah.
So there's a couple things that kind of went together. In the summer and fall of 2016 at Mid-City Can, we were running a really robust civic engagement campaign and trying to register young people to vote. And we were really believing that we believe that there is power, that voting is an exercise of power, and registering to vote is an exercise of power, and wanting our communities to be registered to vote so that they have more power and can exercise that power. And some of that voter registration work brought us to community college campuses. And I was in community college classrooms talking about why it was important to register to vote and trying to get students to do that. And when I did that voter registration work, I never did it from I didn't like to do it from like a table outside of outside the building and say, hey, register to vote. I didn't say you have a civic duty. We'd have organizing conversations. We would talk about the world as it is and the world as it should be, and how voting can help bring that better world, make that possible. And they were amazing conversations. And one of the reasons I love organizing with youth is they don't come at it from an ideological perspective or a partisan perspective. They just show up as people who think certain things are right and certain things are wrong, and the world should be set up in a way where more right happens than wrong. And in those conversations, I found myself kind of being pulled back to working with students, remembering how much I love that, both from my time as a coach and the time I spent abroad teaching. I definitely appreciated being able to work with community college students, many of them who were first generation college students like myself. All of that was really inspiring. And so I started thinking, okay, well, maybe I can teach some community college courses. And I was kind of just like with curiosity, putzing around the community college district website and figuring out like what does it look like to be able to teach some courses here. And coincidentally, at the same time, around that time, I went to a fundraiser for Kamala Harris's Senate campaign. And I heard a conversation happening about a position on the community college board opening up. And the two people having this conversation are friends of mine. They were friends then, and they're even closer friends today. But what I heard was like really bothersome to me, because what it sounded like is that this position was going to open up, and people didn't really know that. The then trustee Zichi, who's kind of a worker champion and labor hero in his own right, was retiring, and there was going to be this vacancy, and it was kind of like, you should run, like here it is. And my I remember like so vividly being like, what the fuck, like that's how this works, like you just like are at the right fundraiser and you get told a position's opening up and like go run for it. And I was like very angry, like internally, like that's not right. And I also knew that this friend of mine had no connection to the community college district. Like there was nothing, like he wasn't a former community college student. He didn't have any, like he wasn't a teacher there. And so it really bothered me. So I didn't do anything with that, but it was in my head. And it kind of made me think that's not how that should work. Fast forward a bit to election night of 2016, and we've had these great conversations with all of these students from all these diverse backgrounds, and Trump wins. And if we remember that night, that was shock to many of us. Maybe not everyone, but to many of us. And I was devastated. And the first people I thought about were those students who I had registered to vote. For two reasons. One, because San Diego City College in particular, like if you just walk into a random classroom, that is who is most vulnerable. Like it was true then, and it is true now. For where they come from, where their families come from, what their backgrounds are, what their economic status is, you name it, and there are vulnerabilities in those classrooms. And the second was I felt like I know I had not done it intentionally, but we just talked about how important it was and how you can make a difference. Yeah. And I believed that and believe it, and a ton of them registered. I mean, it was like a super, super successful effort. And California actually had a pretty good night. In that election night in 2016, there was some important justice reform that happened. San Diego actually had some big wins, but all of that didn't feel. It was hard to see any of it, and so I kind of felt like I deceived these students unintentionally. So I went. Some of the professors who I'd met, they let me go back and have follow-up conversations, and in those conversations, asking what it would look like to like how they felt, and then what sort of support they felt like they needed, and really kind of seeing a way in which the community college district could even be better in supporting those students. I knew the district was intent on that, but thinking there's a role to play here for the district to do even more. Believing that my personal connection to community colleges, my sister was attending classes at the time. Again, I went through the community college system. It made me even more interested in serving in that capacity. But I spent a good 7 months just kind of having conversations and listening, meeting with professors and talking to students about figuring out whether or not it made sense for me to run, or if I could be, of value in that position as a trustee. And eventually, pulled the trigger, because it felt like, based on who was talking about running in that moment and the conversations that I had, it did really feel like I could bring something that couldn't be brought by the other folks who were considering running at the time.
So that was your first seat? Was a board member at a community college? So
it was a wild campaign. We definitely were up against the odds in that one, but I ran for community college trustee in the 2018 election. So we spent 13 months campaigning for a trustee seat, and that's not typically the way those
no, not at all.
Those work. But we knocked on tens of thousands of doors. We ran that campaign the same way you would run a campaign for any office. And we recruited a ton of young people to participate. We had college students from UCSD and SDSU and community colleges who were participating in the campaign, knocking on doors. And we did enough to squeak by in the primary. We got through the primary by 23 votes.
Oh, wow. Every vote counted then.
Every vote counted then. Oh. And then in the general election, we were running against then City Councilmember David Alvarez, who had the support at the time of of the AFT, and I understood, why they made the decision they did, but I just wasn't backing down. And we pulled off a huge upset and won by a very small margin to secure a seat on the Board of Trustees.
Oh, wow.
I remember that. That was a wild campaign.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we worked really, really hard.
I worked at the Labor Council during that time, but I don't remember this. So
Yeah.
I remember.
you remember? Oh, okay.
But I think it's because we knew each other like outside of it as well. But yeah, I mean, it was uncomfortable because I had wanted to pursue the AFT endorsement. I had pursued it, and I studied my ass off for that meeting. Like, I know where my values are, and I also, again, I understand when there's like a current elected that you have an established relationship with. Like, even then I like kind of like intuitively understood that, but I also fundamentally believed that I was going to put like more into it, and thought it was worth pursuing it. I don't know if I realized exactly how much work we were all signing up for by continuing. Made that decision with some of the young folks and my then girlfriend, now wife, like, because we were all like kind of in it, and some of the first people on the campaign who eventually came to work for me at city council, we made that decision together. Like, should we bow out or should we keep going? And we decided to keep going.
And what were you hoping to accomplish once you got into that position?
Yeah, so there was the policy piece, right? We wanted to expand free community college for everyone. We wanted to make make transportation free. We wanted the district to be more assertive on housing for both students and for faculty. So there was like the policy pieces, but I think the other part was being more closely connected with the student body, and the district cares immensely, did then and does now, about students. That I never ever got the impression that was not the case, but like, how much did students feel like their voices were being heard? That there was, I thought, some room for improvement there. And so there was kind of those dual things of like, these are policy directions I'd like to see the district head in, and then how do we more closely work with students to make those things happen and make sure that they're being heard on a day-to-day basis.
So you went from school board member to city council member. I think you won in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
So you went from school board member, and not all of us know who they are. Like, I don't know who our school board members are, except for Greg. I know he's on the county of San Diego. Yeah. But going to city council is kind of like a different echelon of politics for sure. How has that impacted your life? Like, you go to a grocery store, you go to the bars or something, people know who you are now. I'm sure it was a big difference from going from school board member to city council member. And is that a positive thing or a negative thing, or what are the nuances behind that?
Yeah. Well, I think that the positive or negative thing, the way I've made all those career decisions that I've described up until this point in this conversation were based on this like pretty simple analysis of what's the most impact that I can make. And so leaving law school, it felt like I could make more impact going through like the advocacy and organizing route than if I were to practice law. And then deciding to run for the community college board was, an opportunity to make more impact there. Even my decision to leave my role at Mid-City Can and then become the executive director of a youth organization, I thought we could do more, have a broader impact. The decision to run for city council was the same, and so I fundamentally do believe that the decisions that we make at the city council impact 1.4 million people who live in this city. So there's huge benefit with that, and I appreciate that significantly. And there are also some downsides for sure. So that the public piece, it was less pronounced at the beginning, partially because like we came into office during the peak of COVID, right? Mm-hmm. So December of 2020, which was actually like the deadliest period of the pandemic, in the States at least. And the first, like, there was a good amount of time where we weren't really out much. The way the work was done definitely felt different. I was super close with all four of my colleagues on the community college board. was never a decision, even when we disagreed, where I wasn't 100% convinced that everyone was making the decision like to advance the mission of the district. And like that's not always that has not always felt the way the case on city council, just to be candid. And then there's like, yeah, as we've done more and more work and been taken positions that are I think like benefit the majority of people but are controversial, that has put more eyes on us. And certainly there's a difference in terms of being out and about in the neighborhood, and people either saying hi and thank you, or feeling like this is the appropriate time to let me know how much they disagree with something that we're doing. That's definitely changed, and that's ramped up a lot over the last couple of months, as well as I've been more vocal about the way that the federal government's terrorizing our communities.
Interesting.
Do you wanna?
I don't know, go for it.
Well, I mean, because that must have been a very challenging decision, and like what to leave after you had mounted this wild campaign, for the community college district, and then like, I'm sure like all that you wanted to accomplish wasn't complete in the time that
Totally.
you were there.
Yeah.
And so like just making that decision, what was the impact or kind of like the reaction from folks?
Yeah.
Because I imagine that it must have been mixed, from like people being very supportive to people
Totally.
maybe not necessarily looking at it that way.
Yeah, that was really tough. So politics are really interesting in a lot of ways, but one of the ways that they're interesting is that you have some people who have super intricate plans, and they spend huge amounts of time and money and energy mapping everything out to get to where they want to go. And that matters. And it can also not matter at all, where things just change overnight. And so I loved my life in the fall of 2019. I was on the community college board, loved the work that I was doing there. I was running this youth nonprofit, and we just had this really great year where we'd kind of reimagined the organization and pivoted to more of an advocacy and organizing model. And it was super rewarding. Like, I loved what I was doing on a day-to-day basis at work. This is September of 2019. I was 2 months away from getting married. Life was great. I was like, this is awesome.
Yeah, why do you want to change that?
Yeah, why? I didn't want to change it. I was in no way walking around being like, I need change. That was absolutely not, because we were less than a year out from having won this exhausting campaign as well. So politics doesn't care about any of that. Like Susan Davis, I remember distinctly, I was in a meeting with the county. We were doing our thing at the Youth Will, the organization I was at. Walk out of it, and there's all this there's messages and push alerts. Susan Davis announces her retirement, and the way that politics works is when a position opens up at a higher level, the dominoes start falling. And very quickly, then council president and council member for District 9, Georgette Gomez, said that she was going to abandon her re-election campaign for city council and pursue that congressional seat. That left a vacancy for that city council race. And I had folks who knew me from my work in the community who were like, you should do that. That you'd be a really good fit for that. And very quickly had some conversations, some of them with the first people I talked to were my colleagues on the board of trustees, because that really, really mattered to me. And, I think the feedback I got was, we love having you as a colleague, and recognizing that being on the city council would mean being able to do more for the same folks that we're trying to serve. And I really appreciated that. And if they would have all told me what are you doing? You just got here. Sit down. I would have thought about everything very differently. Again, the encouragement from folks in the community, and then quite frankly, seeing how the race was sizing up if I was not in it. So I knew what we were, me and my team were capable of in terms of campaigning. I was really confident, because if we just had done it, we'd just won it, what is essentially a citywide race with almost no money. Like, we know to organize, we know to knock on doors, and the alternative I thought was unacceptable, and I didn't see anyone entering the race that was going to be able to be a viable challenger to who that alternative was, and that really like the kind of decision point of, all right, like, we need to do this or not do this, and what does it look like if we don't? Like, that definitely played a important factor, because it doesn't have to be me. Like, I don't ever think like it needs to be me, like, just like kind of inherently for any position. But when you like start getting into the weeds of, okay, well then who is it going to be? Are you okay with who would be if it's not you, or at least are you okay with not having tried?
The alternative.
Yeah.
Definitely. So I wanted to ask you of things that you're working on right now. Now we got to know
Sorry,
you a
can I,
little bit.
one more thing with that, Satomi, because I think this part's important. I also really thought it was important for me to not abandon those causes when I got to the city council, right? And so we still try to work closely with the community college district. I consider all of those folks that I served with friends, and have an open door policy when it comes to wanting to hear how the city can better support San Diego Community College District. So sometimes that's in direct ways, like in my role at MTS and Sandag, being able to even more kind of aggressively advocate for and then vote for the youth transit pass program,
absolutely.
right? Expand that program to foster youth and former foster youth up to the age of 24. Foster youth are there are a lot of foster youth who are community college students, right, and have expanded access to free transportation as a result of those programs, supporting their efforts to build housing. So there's also that part as well, which is like making sure that, it's not as if I stepped onto the city council and like have forgotten the fact that I have this connection to the district. I still believe like so wholeheartedly in what they are trying to do and who they're trying to support, that I know I have a responsibility, like an extra responsibility, because of the fact that I didn't get everything done that I wanted to do, and I just wasn't there long enough to do that.
So less platform and more fundamental beliefs in what should be changed, or in order to make the environment better for everyone.
Yeah, and even going back to the platform piece, like, so I don't vote on the policy goal in the same way, but do I have an opportunity from this different seat to push for that policy goal from a different angle? And in many cases, the answer is yes.
Nice, good stuff. The cost of living committee, was that your brainchild? Did you start that? Was that what you wanted to do and you created it? And what is it?
Yeah. So last year, as we were, thinking about, was able to serve for 3 years as council president, which was amazing. And as we were thinking about handing the baton over to then council president pro tem LaCava, I was doing a lot of thinking about, like, what do we want to be able to focus on if we're able to win a second term, and the cost of living is like the biggest issue impacting San Diegans. And so while there are various committees that can address that in a variety of ways at the city council, it's different to have a committee that's solely focused on that issue. And so I pitched the idea of establishing a select committee to focus exclusively on the cost of living. And now Council President LaCava was gracious enough to give us the opportunity to lead that committee. I'm serving on it with Councilmember Foster and Councilmember Von Wilpert. And we think it's a way of doing a couple things. One, actually like passing meaningful policy that we believe will have a tangible impact on people's lives. And two, letting folks know that we're fighting, that we're trying. And I did have like some people who were like, "Are you sure you want to put your name on the cost of living, because it is unlikely to go down when you're in that leadership position? And if it doesn't, are you going to be you're going to be like taking the L?" And I just don't think that that's how leadership is supposed to work. Like, because you aren't going to be able to fix something completely doesn't mean you shouldn't try. You certainly shouldn't show the folks who we are elected to fight for that we're trying to fight for them. And so I think from those two perspectives, the tangible, which is the policy themselves, but also the intangible, I thought it was important to have the city council have a committee that's focused on, again, what I think is the number one issue for the majority of San Diegans.
Right. And thank you for doing that, because it seems kind of obvious that we should have something, cost of living is a huge issue in San Diego, a huge issue that no one has taken on directly until this point. And so the fact that, just creating the committee so that we can have a dialogue at the very least about what is happening and understanding how we got here, I think is critical to actually at least catalyzing a change or beginning the change. So I think it's, that was huge.
Yeah, and I think by having a committee, you're putting a spotlight that cost of living has gone out of control. So we're admitting to it. It's like, hey, everybody, we agree cost of living is out of control. So let's address it now. And this is a vehicle for that.
Totally, yeah. And so housing is the number one driver of that.
Housing,
and we do, I think, some really important work at the city to try to address that issue, but that's not the only driver of it, right?
Yeah.
We know that there's, I think corporate greed is driving the increased cost of living kind of across our lives. We know that corporate greed, which pushes down wages or suppresses wage increases, that's also leading to the cost of living being less attainable for folks. The way we think about it is there's two ways to address not being able to afford things. One is to make things cheaper. The other is to put more money in your pocket so that you can pay for those things. And it's going to need to be a combination of both of those things in order to get people into a better place.
Absolutely. I mean, we're no strangers to the fact that, here in San Diego, the median home price is over $1 million. Over $1 million, whereas the national average is hovering around 400,000, which is insane. People are paying upwards 70-80% of their income on housing, which ideally it would be at 30-40%, and so you could actually have a quality of life. But obviously here in San Diego, that's not what's happening. And you're absolutely right. It's two-pronged, multi-pronged, I should say, where wages have not kept up with the cost of living, and it is due to corporate greed, because it's capitalism. It's prioritizing shareholder wealth and the priorities of shareholders over people, and where does it end, right?
Yeah, well, where I think it will end if we don't fight back is with people being priced out of the city and quality of life continuing to degrade, and fewer people being able to see a good future for themselves and their families. And I'm not okay with that. And so, again, it's about fighting back.
I think where it'll end is pitchforks and and people just blowing it up. I think we're at the point where Karl Marx talks about it. I know a socialist and stuff, but I took sociology, and I'm a sociology major, so I quote him sometimes. But it's eventually, if it gets to where people feel alienated so much and they don't make enough to make ends meet, so they don't have an identity anymore anywhere, and you're getting priced out of everywhere. You don't have an identity anymore. You don't care about life anymore. So you're going to look for answers, and you're going to turn to violence. So I think eventually we're going to hit that critical point, or that snapping point, where society is okay, fuck this. I don't care about rules anymore. Whatever they say on TV, the politicians and all these people, they're all lying to us. And look what's going on. I say, look what happened with Luigi. I like to bring Luigi up as an example, the guy that killed that healthcare guy, the CEO. And people didn't turn on him. People are supporting him, free Luigi and all this stuff, because people empathize with what he did. People hate CEOs. People hate rich people, especially people in the healthcare industry. They're the enemy. The media try to turn it oh, no, wait, he did something wrong. And which he did. He killed somebody.
Yeah.
But I think people are yeah, who cares? He's a bad guy anyway.
They understand his motivation,
yeah.
Right? The fact that, but how are we defining he killed people? Yeah, it's obvious that he shot him, or maybe he didn't. Allegedly.
Sorry,
shot
Luigi.
him. But that CEO, how many people did that CEO kill by virtue of signing documents or approving policies that allowed healthcare coverage to be denied, to deny people, critical like access to healthcare or medical necessity, right? How many people have died as a result of the malfeasance of these corporations that are prioritizing, once again, shareholder like profits over everybody else? And so I think you're right. Like, it's getting to a boiling point where we've seen the divide between class, and you were talking about identity. Like in the Democratic Party, I think, a lot of a lot of Democrats, are neoliberal, and I think that has contributed a lot to where we're at now. Like, there has been a divorce between identity issues, so you can be out and proud, right? You could be, supporting like the Black Caucus, right? But when it comes to class issues, they weren't hand in hand, right? We moved away from that civil rights era, like racial justice means economic justice means racial justice, and so you can't have one without the other, and that kind of like separated to just the identity issues and not the class. And like that's how I feel like we've arrived to where we are now, where we're just like sitting ducks.
Yeah, well, there's a lot in there, and so one, we just know that this isn't just an American societal thing. This is just generally how societies work, and I think that's what, like, Marx studies at the beginning of the manifesto. He talks about like the history of mankind up until this point is like this struggle between basically the haves and have-nots, right? And we know that the more disparate the greater the disparities between those who have and those who don't, there is a ticking clock on how long those who don't are willing to wait to be seen with dignity and have respect and have what they need to survive. That's just like, that's fundamental. That's a human characteristic. And I simultaneously understood where folks were like coming from last year during this, I think it was last year during the Luigi conversation. And I was also very uneasy with it, because one thing about me is like, this is like a core belief of mine, that humanity is like, it is essential that we see each other's humanity. And I can despise you as a person. I can really dislike everything you're about. And because of my family's history, because of my spiritual beliefs, I still need to see you as a person. And I have real concerns when we stop doing that, especially those of us who are fighting for what we think is a better world, because the second we start to dehumanize anyone, regardless of their job or their background, we're saying it's acceptable to dehumanize someone. And so that's just a fundamental principle of mine. So that being said, what does it say about where we're at? Where so many people were like, I get it. That tells us something. And we can simultaneously not agree with that and need to hear that is where folks' minds are and their hearts are, that there's that level of frustration. And you both spoke to why, because people have in their families felt the impacts of what it means when a corporation with a ton of money clearly made a decision to make more money rather than save the life of the person you care most about in the world. If you're going to put a recipe together to make someone hate someone, that's the recipe,
but
right?
Isn't that one of the ultimate dehumanization?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. So, and I would just say yes, and the antidote to that is not dehumanizing.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, right. So yes, and I think that's where when people feel dehumanized, when they feel like their humanity is not being recognized, they oftentimes strike back by failing to see other people's humanity. And so I think, what I want to encourage us to do is really talk about the world that we're trying to build. There's so many things that we need to fight against. And I'm all for those fights. You'll hear me talk about that often. And I think that it's equally important that we talk about what we're trying to build. One, because from an organizing perspective, I think you're capped at how many people will join your effort if you're solely in an anti-blank mode. But if like what we're talking about is a future for everyone, like where everyone can thrive, and like we believe that there's enough out there for people to be treated with respect and dignity, and no one needs to go without a house or without health care or without food. That's something that theoretically there's space for everyone in, unless you don't want there to be enough for everyone. So I just want to keep pushing us toward not just denouncing what we don't like, but calling for what we do want. So, again, the solution to an issue like healthcare being treated the way it is just to me creating a system where everyone gets the care that they need, because there are enough resources in the world and in this country to do that.
So leading with love.
Yeah, I know that sounds really cheesy and cliche
It's
right
not,
now, but
no, it's not, but it's the truth, right?
And I think the other reason for that is I actually think that that's like the most power. Like I truly believe that is like the most powerful force. And like anyone who's like, we think about our families, like the way we love our kids, the way we love our parents, our siblings, like that's the fucking strongest thing in the world, right? And like you see people do things that they would otherwise never be able to do because they summon like that power that comes from loving someone, right? Like a mom's love for their baby, like that's like superhuman, and you don't get that from hate. You get that from love.
Absolutely.
Speaking of love, there's an ordinance that you're championing, the $25 an hour ordinance for workers in the hospitality industry. Can you like talk about it a little bit, and why did you decide to champion something so, I guess you used the term earlier, controversial, where you're probably going to get a lot of pushback, and what does that pushback look like?
Yeah. Well, because people should be able to afford to live in the city that they work. Like it starts.
That's
How
pretty
novel.
complicated.
What?
It starts with a really basic belief in that if you work in a city and you're like doing what you can to survive, you should be able to afford to live there. And so it starts from a very basic premise. I do understand that there would be, going to $25 per hour across the economy tomorrow, there would probably be some shock waves that people at the bottom end of the income and spectrum, I think, would actually have a difficult time absorbing, because there would be some increased costs associated with it. But a sector that is primarily overwhelmingly serving tourists and is overwhelmingly run by multinational corporations that do not sit here in the city of San Diego, that to me seems like the perfect place to start in terms of lifting folks' wages. And there's no reason why the folks who are making that industry work shouldn't be making what they need to live here. No one should, but it's the consequences of lifting their wages have such a little impact on San Diegans from a negative perspective, and such a high one from a positive perspective. I think it's something we have to pursue.
Definitely, because you're talking about the tourism industry. Tourism brings in millions, if not billions of dollars, billions of dollars into the county, probably.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like Comic-Con alone was like
over 300,000 people.
Yeah.
Jeez.
And obviously, those are like people that attend Comic-Con. What about the auxiliary businesses that benefit from this? And I don't know, there's unlimited benefits to tourism. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I read this a while ago. So do we get most of our GDP from tourism?
So there's a very important part of the city's revenue that comes from our TOT. Mm-hmm. Get a lot from sales tax. Those are really big sources of income. I will say, just to kind of, I know what you mean by like the unlimited benefits, and I wouldn't say that we've tapped into those yet. And there's like a overarching philosophy, in addition to like the basic idea that people who work in a city should be able to live in that city, and that's San Diego as a city does not work for San Diegans. That for way too long, the city has worked for the tourism industry. It's worked for corporate bosses, not for its people. And so we keep saying, using this phrase, make San Diego work for San Diegans. And we mean that literally, we mean that figuratively. Literally meaning like we need to show up to work at City Hall with an emphasis on the people who live here and who work for our city. And in the figurative way, like no longer can it be the tourism industry and these corporate bosses who've typically run San Diego be the ones who are who continue to run this place. So that tourism industry, I think, for the tourism story of the trickle down effects of trickle down benefits of tourism are something that we should just all accept as purely good and not try to change anything. That needs to be, we need to ask some questions about that. Is that actually working for San Diegans? And if you step back for a second, I think it's fair to say, well, there are benefits to San Diego, but it's not totally working for us. It's not working for the people who can't afford to live here. It's not working for the people who once lived in this city but have now had to move an hour away, or now living across the border so that they can afford to afford a place to live. It's not working for the city as a whole when we're subsidizing that industry at the cost of parks and rec centers and libraries that are essential to families who don't have access to certain opportunities in other ways. So I think we can say that something offers a lot of benefits and say that it should offer more, and that San Diego, of all cities, is in a position to demand better from an industry that's making so much money here.
So what do you say to the folks that are like against this increase, that say it's going to have a negative impact on San Diegans, that the prices are going to go up, and already the cost of living's too high, and then all the other.
Well, again, I think there is a way that we could have done wage increases that could have led to a big increase in the cost of living. No doubt that there is a way that could have been done. That's not this. No one's groceries should go up because people who are working in the hotels are making a couple dollars more per hour. That's just not. One thing doesn't have to do with the other.
Yeah.
Over time, sure, wages may increase, but not in the way that I think that they're trying to make it sound. I think this is one of the ways we push back. If LA can afford to pay their workers much more, and Long Beach can, why can't San Diego? And we need to have a little more confidence in ourselves as a city. This is an amazing tourist destination because of the weather and the beaches and the attractions for sure, but also because of the people who work here. And 3 of those things aren't going anywhere. The 4th thing, the workers will leave if they can't afford to live here anymore. And so this is actually a way of, I think, better protecting the industry over the long haul, in addition to making sure that it works better for its people. Fundamentally, a lot of this does feel like it's about greed. It's about people feeling like either certain work is not dignified enough to warrant a decent wage, that there is no inherent value in all work, that should provide people the right to have enough to live in the city that they work, no matter what that job is. There are people who see, sadly, someone else's rise to dignity mean indignity for themselves, and I think that speaks to a lot to the way that capitalism works in our society and the hierarchical nature of things. And we need to remind people that your problem in this equation is not the person who's earning less than you now. It's the person at the top of the food chain who's earning more than all of you combined. And oftentimes when you remind people of that, they do pause for a second, but they're living in a system that tells them, don't let them rise up, because that's going to mean that you're worse off. And then the other thing is there's just some inaccuracies in the way they talk about this. And, simultaneously we'll hear from folks, particularly in the tourism industry, everyone who works for us already makes $25 an hour. There's no need to do this. Well, so there's 2 responses to that. One would be, then why do you care? They also say that this is going to lead to a 45% increase in labor costs. And those 2 things can't be true at the same time. Like, either everyone's earning more than this and no one's going to actually get a raise from it, or you're going to need to pay people more because they're not earning enough. And so hearing those inaccuracies in this conversation certainly has not dissuaded us from continuing to push. And I think it's one of the reasons why we've had such positive momentum as we move toward a full city council hearing on the item.
Definitely. And is it going to pass? How do you feel about it?
Well, I can't speak for my colleagues. It passed unanimously out of the Cost of Living Committee. Mm-hmm. I think we're, so first to draft it, and the second to move it to full council. So that puts us in a really good spot. I think that the community has done a great job. The labor community has done a great job of telling the stories of the workers who would benefit from this, the conditions that they're working in now. other community partners saying this fight is also our fight. People recognizing that there are folks who are working really hard, working full time, and are not getting by and reliant on services that are provided by some of our community partners who've made a strong case for it. We've even seen some small business owners, the folks at Business for Good, which is an awesome grassroots organization of small business owners, show up and say, this isn't about the economics not working. This is about you not wanting them to work. This is about you wanting so much that you're refusing to share the wealth with the folks who are making your business possible. And I think that's actually been a really important part of the conversation as well. I think that having that business perspective in the room has been powerful. So I expect we'll have even more people at council. I really encourage folks to engage between now and then, and to push back on the idea that this isn't the time for this, because industry lobbyists love that. Well, there's economic headwinds, the Trump tariffs, and first of all, let's be honest, like, he's in office largely because those folks and their friends supported him and poured billions of dollars into electing him. So miss me with that reason. And there is never a wrong time to provide people with what they need to survive. And that's really what this is about.
And what do you think about the folks that are like, okay, we can support 25, an increase to 25, but it should be ramped up over a period of time?
Yeah, I think that depends. I think that depends on the business and the model. I'll use this as an example. We ended up exempting smaller hotels from the ordinance, and we tried to meet with everyone who's willing to meet. We sat down with folks representing the smaller hotels and an owner and operator of smaller hotels, and he kind of showed us the math. Mm-hmm. And if you're a kind of discount motel or hotel and you only have so many rooms, the only way to make up for that increase in wages is by increasing room rates. And at a certain point, you no longer become a discount. Yeah. There's no spa to subsidize those rooms. There's no restaurant to subsidize those rooms. And okay, like, we just had a conversation. You showed me the numbers. I see what you're saying. And I think that there is some merit to that. And so we wanted to work with them. And the threshold that we currently have of 150 rooms, there's a fundamental difference that starts to happen when you look at those hotels on a hotel by hotel basis. One, again, being able to, a small profit per room times 150 rooms looks very different than times 20 rooms. Having those amenities on site looks very different, so that you can make the money that those hotels make off the spa services and the restaurants.
These luxury hotels, they're owned by private equity. You're talking about, like you said earlier, like, these are the shareholders, the people that own these hotels are not in San Diego.
Yeah.
They are not. They could give two shits about the people struggling on a day-to-day basis. But it totally makes sense that smaller mom and pop shops, are going to be treated differently because their bottom line isn't necessarily to the shareholders. They could be family-owned businesses that are also trying to make a living, that are in San Diego as well.
Yeah, and so tell me, if you looked at kind of the breakdown between the 150 and up, 150 and below, and then 150 and up, that's another difference that you would see. Another distinction would be who owns those properties, right? So individual sole proprietors or family-owned businesses versus multinational, corporate entities. It's just a different model altogether. So to answer your question in terms of ramp up, that's why we try to leave some space for the conversation. We need to get people to what they need to earn as quickly as possible. And I don't want us to be unwilling to listen to someone if they're willing to show us the math of what this could mean for their ability to continue on as a business in a place where people are able to work. What I've said from the beginning, I would not accept as sufficient evidence is very well-paid executives and lobbyists throwing a temper tantrum and saying that San Diego is just not going to work as a tourist destination anymore. People are going to stop coming here. I think it's bullshit, and I need more evidence than that to change my position.
Hawaii in terms of tourist destinations. Everybody wants to come here.
Yeah.
Yes, and that's not changing unless we lose the people who make all of that possible.
Like quality of service, like the folks that actually help to make the tourism industry run.
Yep.
Definitely. Do you see this ordinance as a stepping stone towards a broader living wage legislation in San Diego?
Yeah, I think I'll kind of answer that in a couple different ways. A year ago, on May Day, I believe, Labor led an action talking about a $25 wage for tourism workers. And some of the folks from the industry showed up shortly afterward and were like, this would devastate our business. And I told them, okay, there's no proposal in front of us, so just no one's voting right now. Mm-hmm. But you need to address the issue that folks who work for you can't afford to live here. And there's a variety of ways that you can do that and get to work. And if you don't get to work, then I'm going to be drawn toward the solutions that are being provided to me. So I think that is part of what we are wrestling with as a community. Mm-hmm. I think almost everyone recognizes that this place is very expensive and tough for people to afford to live in. And so if we think about what's needed for people to get by, to feel comfortable in the way that like everyone's kind of like should feel comfortable, like knowing that they're not going to lose their house tomorrow, that they're going to have food on the table for their kids, that they're going to have health care. There are different ways to get there. One could be by reducing housing costs significantly, right? So if we see a large investment, I think this is the best path forward, a large investment in publicly owned housing that isn't purely subjected to profit-driven motives, that could be a way of getting people to a place of stability more quickly. If fewer people had to pay for childcare, that could be a huge, because childcare is so expensive.
Mm-hmm. So expensive. It's like a second mortgage.
It's like a second mortgage for real. It's a second rent or second mortgage. What would it look like if the city had childcare guaranteed to everyone? You're basically keeping $1,500, $2,000, $3,000 a month in people's pockets that way. You look at the various things that folks are paying the most for, and I think there's different ways to meet those needs. And the conversation we need to have as a community is, how do we want to have those needs met? One way to do that is by increasing wages. Other ways are by having some of these things offered as more of a public good. And I think the need, because that's what it is right now, it's a need to earn more in order to afford essentials like food, housing, healthcare, childcare. If we take those needs away and provide for them in another way, then the need to earn $25, $30, $35, $40 an hour, that starts to look a little bit different as well. So I'm not meaning to dodge the question. I mean it from the perspective of, my goal is for San Diegans to have what they need to live a good life. And that means a house, that means food, that means safety, that means childcare and healthcare. And I'm very open to different paths to provide to get there, but I am completely committed to that destination of everyone who lives in this city and who works in this city being able to have that basic quality of life.
Did anyone of those folks that came to say that the 25 would break them actually come forward with any type of solution?
Not one that was concrete enough to act on. I told them, my guess is your workers would probably need to earn less if you built housing for them. Maybe this might look different. I don't know. It's like throwing an idea out. We haven't seen that yet.
Yeah.
Corporations just want us to subsidize everything for them, and then they still want to pay less for workers so they can still profit on top of that. That's the way I look at things. Like farm owners back in the day, they had their own little housing, their store. They kept the farmers there, so they would pay them, but they would use that money back in the farm because it was a company store, company housing, and all that stuff. So I think and then in these situations, we're always subsidizing all these corporations like Amazon, for example, or Chevron, and they're the job creators. I'm guessing that's the rationale behind a lot of this. But I think now we need to start breaking through all of that. Like, okay, instead of subsidizing these corporations like Walmart and stuff, it might look differently than just giving them money. Walmart, we're subsidizing by most of their workers are on food stamps.
Yeah, public assistance.
So we're already paying for all of that as taxpayers.
Yep.
So that's where I come in, like with Amazon. We need to stop cutting them off of all these assistance on them. It's like socialism for these corporations, but not for the people.
Welfare queens,
They're the real welfare queens.
Yeah.
But I think maybe with this cost of living committee that you're put together and this $25 an hour ordinance, we're addressing all that. We're like now like, okay, let's start dissecting this issue for reals now.
Yeah, and we're trying to tackle it from a few different perspectives, right? Some of them are big, like this minimum wage increase, and then we've got things that are more kind of more granular and might feel a little bit smaller, but are real as well. So we had our policy that passed earlier this year to change the way coupons are offered in grocery stores, and we'd seen this shift toward this kind of gamification of offering discounts in grocery stores where digital coupons are listed on an item but not accessible to everyone, and so you have people, especially seniors, putting items in their cart expecting one price but not actually being able to access that adding up to $15, $20, $25 a trip to the store. And we passed a policy, a first in the nation policy around grocery price transparency that isn't going to save people thousands of dollars all at once, but is going to save them $15, $20 per trip to the store. But it's all born from the same problem in my mind, which is corporate America deciding that every single transaction in our lives is an opportunity to squeeze as much money as possible. And so at the grocery store, that looks like these games that they're playing with the way discounts are offered. With housing, that looks like the way that fees are added. New fees, arise out of nowhere and are used to skirt around state laws in terms of how much can actually be rent can be increased. We see it in a variety of areas. We passed another policy banning the use of AI technology to rig rents. So we're going to hit this from a variety of angles, because so long as corporate America is as committed to extracting as much money as possible from all of us, we need to be willing to fight just as hard. And so I think sometimes the problem can seem so overwhelming that we don't know where to start, and so we don't start at all. And the way that we've tried to tackle this is, one, acknowledge with some humility, we're not going to just like magically solve the cost of living crisis overnight. Can't do it. Wish I could, but don't have that power. But we're going to try where we can. And so if it's $15 every time you go to the grocery store, if it's the 7% an artificial inflation that we think that has been proven to result from the way that AI was being used to rig rental prices, if it's the way that people aren't earning what they need to at hotels, we're going to hit this from a variety of angles so that slowly but surely, again, folks can feel that we are can see that we are fighting to put dollars in their pockets or keep dollars in their pockets, and that we are like locked arms with the community in seeing the struggle and trying to help them get ahead.
So very much a big picture approach, like different angles. I'm curious because you have a lot of great like policy ideas, and it sounds like you're dreaming big, which I think is amazing. So if you had unlimited political capital, actual capital, like what's the next big like kind of labor reform that you would try to get done or passed, or that you would see done in San Diego?
Labor reform specifically?
Oh, doesn't have to be labor reform.
Well, I think what I would start to tell me, because it's an impact that it's an issue that impacts so many people, would be housing. So if you unlimited resources, social housing, we would see a like New Deal era investment in publicly owned housing here in San Diego, and that could go hand in hand with some of the private development that happens, but it would be building the amount of housing that we need in order to meet the demand and have as much of that as possible be untethered from, purely profit-driven models. And I think there's this important thing to keep in mind. I know you know this, but not a lot of folks do. There's nothing, almost nothing right now in our current housing system that isn't at least somewhat profit-driven. Even a nonprofit affordable housing developer, right? So we're not talking about a CEO who's making, $100 million with, massive bonuses. We're not talking about a Blackstone-owned corporation. They have to access capital. And when they access capital, they have to go to a bank. And when they go to a bank, the bank wants to make some money. And so even they are stuck in this profit model to a certain extent. And we simply have to shift out of that. And so to me, if there's a single thing that I could do to provide the most relief to the most people in San Diego, it would be ensuring that we have sufficient supply of housing, and that supply wasn't directly tethered to the profit desires of folks who are going to just very practically speaking prioritize that profit over the people who are living in those homes, because I think that would fundamentally change the quality of life for everyone in this city. It'd take a lot of pressure off workers. As a labor-specific issue, I am always going to start that conversation by hearing from workers. What is the issue that's most pressing to workers in this city? What would make the biggest difference in their lives? I think it's really tough for me to try to do that on my own. I'm making an assumption I'm probably going to miss the mark if I do that.
Going directly to the source. I like that.
Definitely. Anything else you want to add to this conversation? Anything else you're working on that you think we should know about?
Well, what should we be working on? I'll flip the table for you two.
I think housing is the biggest issue. Like, everybody is one paycheck away or one medical bill away from becoming homeless. Like, since 65% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, so any medical emergency will get them into debt where they can't even pay it, and they end up homeless. 50% of homeless people have jobs. I mean, I saw that like a couple of years ago, and I talked a lot of smack about it, but like this one community college, and it's not on them. I think the intention was good, and it was good. Like, they allow teachers to park in parking lots to sleep overnight. These are teachers and professors that went to school to get degrees, and that was their solution. And I think it's great, right? Like, we need to poke at these issues in different ways, but that's how desperate the situation, or that's how bad the situation is, that even teachers are homeless and they have to sleep in their cars, and we have to pass legislation to help them.
And the fact that it's socially, like, it's normalized.
Right?
Yeah. It's so normalized. So housing I definitely think one of the biggest ways we address a lot of these problems is like the democratizing the workplace, because we know that when there's a union in a workplace, that folks are more likely to make a living wages, have benefits, and so making it easier for folks to organize instead of having all these obstacles in front of them when they want to organize and have a voice and somewhat level the playing field a bit, I think would be one of the other biggest. Because 70% approval rating, 71% approval rating, across the United States.
Yeah.
Really believe that unions, they would join a union if they could.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact is, we're at less than 10% density nationally.
Yeah.
And so there's a disconnect between what people want and desire and what is actually possible. And so I definitely think, that could contribute to helping improve the quality of life for everyone, is if everyone were able to have access to that.
Yeah, I it's interesting in some of these conversations around the minimum wage, or it actually happens with a variety of sectors, sometimes with housing developers as well, where there's this assumption that by engaging organized labor, they're going to immediately kill their ability to continue on as a business. And I ask them to stop for a second and consider that the workers they want the business to succeed as well. And there's really no risk in terms of seeing existential threat to someone's business, unless you are there to exploit people. But construction workers don't have work if things are not being built, and they're going to work with the folks with the developer to make sure that a project pencils. Someone who's working at a hotel doesn't want the hotel to go out of business. And this this immediate assumption that engaging with organized labor is going to mean a threat to your business, I think really misses the mark in understanding what a union is, which is, you know, a collection of workers who are trying to speak with a unified voice. Obviously, there's ways that balances the scales of power that I think folks on the ownership side of businesses are often uncomfortable with, but there's a huge benefit to that as well. You can have a workforce that is more likely to be committed to their jobs, to see a future with themselves with that company. So, you know, I'd obviously love to see that. Let me ask you, I'm curious, both of your thoughts on the kind of impacts of money in politics. Yeah, is that an issue that's worth us addressing?
We should keep it the same. I'm just kidding.
Overturn Citizens United.
Oh, yeah.
Corporations are not human people.
Yeah.
And the fact that they get to literally get away with murder, but there's no repercussions for them is problematic. And the fact that there's so much dark money and corporate money in politics is problematic.
Yeah.
Like, it's part of the reason why we are here today in the situation that we're facing with this federal fascist regime.
Yeah, you can say anything you want, and also I think maybe like move towards like a publicly funded elections.
Yeah.
That's what New York has, New York City.
Look at them.
And look at them. Look at what just happened in their primary. So I think looking in terms of taking private money out, because they do buy everything. They buy elections. They in the courts we see what's going on with Diddy. Like, if you have enough money, you can get away with anything. So. Like, and then all of us citizens, we're seeing this and we're like, no, what? Everything's fucked. Why should I participate? It's already fucked to begin with.
Yeah.
So my voice doesn't matter. My vote doesn't matter. That's why only 50-something% of Americans vote.
Yeah.
Because we're so over it. And I voted, but I'm just saying, like, as Americans, they're just so over it. Like, no matter where you vote to, if it's a Democrat in office, they're like, I don't know, like, it got worse these last 4 years no matter what. Like, the cost of living continue to go up. Sure, there's a difference between a Democrat in office and a Republican. We see it. I acknowledge that. But it's not enough to where it's like people are not becoming homeless. Homelessness has continued to skyrocket. People, even with health care, can't afford it because of premiums and deductibles. And these wars are still going on, whether it's a Democrat or Republican. So it's hard to talk to our members and be like, hey, but this one's the one. Trust me. Like,
totally.
It's gonna save us. I don't look at it that way. We always speak in like, they're not gonna save us. Trust me.
Yeah.
It's us. We're gonna save each other.
Yep.
But we still have to support politicians that are gonna swing for us and stuff, especially in local politics. I do believe that. I mean, you're the one doing this $25 an hour ordinance and taking it in the chin with these hoteliers. So I do believe in local politics the most. I'm not gonna lie, but I think, like Satomi says, I think if it's an organized workforce, then we're more engaged to begin with. We're more educated in everything.
Yep.
In politics too, we're 10% more likely to vote if
Yep.
we're in a union because we're more educated by the union.
And so that also speaks to what we need as a society in America is like we need to increase the politicization of people, like, and it needs to start like when they're young, right? Like students that come into the world and they think one way and not necessarily because of a certain party, and understanding like what are the root causes of why we are here, like what brought us here, right? And understanding what are, like, making those connections so that we can address the problem at the root, right? Versus like addressing it like, you know, just piecemeal, which doesn't help anyone.
Putting band-aids on
absolutely.
issues. We might as well throw a curveball. So I guess it's not a curveball, but I think we're over an hour, and I know you're getting text messages. So what is like the theme of this podcast is solidarity. As you can see, there's a bunch of different unions and stuff, and we're heavily involved with labor. I believe that only with solidarity we come together and we fight for people that we don't know. Yeah. Like, we don't know everybody. So if we're fighting these fights, it's going to benefit people that we don't even know. That's the whole idea behind solidarity to me. But what does solidarity mean to you when you hear that? Like, what does it look like? What does it sound like?
Yeah. Well, I actually had an opportunity to think about this a lot last week. I had an opportunity to be recognized at the Labor Council dinner with the Solidarity Award. And I think I shared during that conversation, during that speech, that It was especially meaningful because I actually think like the labor movement understands solidarity in a very unique way. It's like that is what the movement is built on, right? Is this idea that, you know, by joining together we can be stronger. And so that makes it like even more meaningful. And some of the examples that I spoke to are, you know, when workers from you know, one sector, when we've got teachers showing up in the picket line for the Unite Here folks, when we've got folks from different workforces who are showing up to support those Kaiser workers who are out there for 6 months, right, over this past year. I think those are great opportunities for solidarity, but we also see other opportunities in this moment for solidarity, and you know, we've seen it in little bursts. Solidarity can look like the folks who were in South Park, who saw the, you know, mass terrorists, mass armed terrorists stand up and saying, no, like, shame on you, get out of my neighborhood. They weren't under immediate threat in that moment, but I think they also understood that they weren't okay living in a country or in a city where this happens, and that was a sign of solidarity. I think, you know, solidarity is when rides to their neighbor's kids because that person's not safe to drive their kids to school anymore. And not to make this too heavy, but I think, again, the moment that we're in actually is creating challenges that, and so I like couldn't do my job if I wasn't able to see hope in like really bad situations. I'd say that I run on hope. Like that's my fuel, right? So we know that in this moment we've got families who are really scared, and parents who are not sure, you know, if today is going to be their last day in this country. And there's responsibilities for us in government to do what we can to protect people, but we cannot at the local level do everything that's would need to be done in order to protect people. We just can't. We have to try to do everything we can, and we've got some policies coming forward soon that I think will help with that. But there's a community aspect to this as well that I think allows all of us to ask ourselves, what sort of community do we want to be living in? And I think it's one with much greater solidarity. And we think about the family who is afraid that their next trip to the grocery store or school or the doctor's office could be their last one here in this country. What do we need to do to create a community where that person is comfortable telling their neighbor, if I don't come home, can you take care of my babies? And I get emotional every time I think about that because of like my own son and how much he means to me. But I also think there's so much beauty in that because if to trust someone with your kids is like the highest standard of love and solidarity, right? So I think that that's a really, in this very dark time, is a really beautiful thing for us to strive for, which is like all of us acting in community in such a way where I say, Satomi, like if something bad happens, like I know you're gonna take care of Benny. Like that's a beautiful thing to strive for. So that's solidarity to me, and I think it's something that we should be working toward. Sorry.
No, don't be sorry.
Yeah,
that's beautiful. Thank you.
So tell me any last words.
You wanted tears. You wanted tears.
I love it.
Oh my goodness.
All right, everybody. Well, that's another episode of Union or Bust. Again, sign on to our Patreon, patreon.com/UnionOrBust. And thank you for joining us. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Cut.